the myth of patriotism, whereby, of course, like with every myth, we don't mean it in a derogatory sense, but quite to the contrary, as being a way of viewing reality, which is helpful and in the long run often very productive to the individual who enjoys in that myth. Joe Campbell used to tell the story, which I have probably told more often than he has, that quite early in his career he was invited by a radio host, and the radio host looked at him and said, "Well, Mr. Campbell, why are you so interested in myth? Everybody knows that a myth is a lie." And Campbell said, "Well, what can I answer to that?" I just let him go. So one runs into these things when dealing with that subject. But let us say a way of understanding reality, a way in which one relates to certain events in the world is a myth. And the fact that in the public press that often is used wrongfully as an indication of an untruth is very, very unfortunate. But in any event, I thought that on this evening, just prior to the 4th of July, we may devote ourselves to the myth and reality of patriotism, and I have very seldom, if ever, spoken on that subject, but I mention now that I always feel like stating at some point that I am twice a patriot. I am first of all a patriot of my native country, Hungary, about which I think I will regale you ad infinitum and maybe ad nauseam today. And in addition to that, I am of course also a patriot of my adopted country, the United States, and I hope that my remarks will be widely enough applicable so that they will cover, therefore, different varieties of patriotism. Now, first, I will beg your indulgence for a shorter period of time, because I am going to regale you with quite a bit of Hungarian history. The reason being that I can use that as an example as to how a particular set of patriotism develops and how it maintains itself and the purposes that it serves. So I hope it won't be too long. If it's too long, then you should, I don't know, maybe jump up and dance the Czardas or something of that sort, and then we can go on. In any event, the word patriotism is derived from the Latin, as so many, and you can tell right away that it has to do with father. Pater is father. So the patriot in ancient Rome would be someone who respects and serves according to his or her ability what later on even in other languages came to be called the fatherland, because the land which gave you birth and upbringing and various experiences into your adulthood is properly called, especially within a Roman and a Latin context, and fatherland. The Romans were very father-oriented. The most horrible form of execution, which will just make you fall out of your chairs if you don't sit very firm, but I'm not going to mention it all, was in the Roman state for a parricide. A parricide is a father murderer, somebody who killed his father, and you wouldn't believe the weird elements of torture that preceded the execution or death of such a person. It's really, actually, it's fun to talk about it because it's fun to watch the astonishment on the faces of people. But I have a number of other things to talk about, so I am going to, but just believe me that is really true. In any event, it was a very father-conscious country, and the issue of a patriota, as would be called in Latin, is an individual who has a great deal of respect for the country where he and possibly his ancestors were settled, and that therefore the people who were alive at that time would follow the customs of respecting the fatherland. So this is the origin of the word patriotism. Now, I must confess that I had a couple of motivations for bringing up this subject. First of all, even though I have been lecturing for more than half a century in this country, I have never spoken about patriotism. And I thought, well, maybe this would be the time to supply that particular need, if indeed it is a need. That was certainly one of my motivations. And the other one being something that I was very shocked within the last couple of weeks. I was talking to someone who shall remain nameless, and the word patriotic as an adjective came up, and this particular person, with horror in her eyes, "Oh, if it's patriotic, that must be bad." And I said, "Well, lady, that's not the way I look at the situation," and I let it go. So anyway, there are, let's say, there are sharply divided opinions about just about anything nowadays, even on the subject of patriotism. But maybe we can dispel some of these difficulties, some of these opinions, and clarify them as much as we may. So what we need to keep in mind, therefore, that beginning with Roman times, there was, let's say, a concept of the land where you are raised and where you are functioning being the fatherland. And if even within that, if you received some benefits, some donation of land or something of that sort, as the people who came from the legions usually got, the veterans, then we had that the word for that was a patrimonium. So again, it's the fatherly gift of your country to you because of what you have done. So the word of the father there was very important. Now, we are a type of people who like to investigate the origins and the history of various institutions, because if we make good headway with that kind of investigation, then we feel that we have more understandable material about the subject. So now you are going to have to extend a little bit of how should I put it, long-time credulity to what I am going to say, because what I am saying is not something that can be proven in a factual manner, but it is really the consensus of anthropologists and of historians. And it is to the effect, I have mentioned that here once before, I think to the consternation of some people, that there are no native people anywhere. Why? Because everybody came from someplace. Maybe ultimately from the spirit world, from the heavens, but we still came from someplace. In any event, to apply that to this particular issue, it seems that as the conclusions of the anthropologists seem to indicate, Teilhard de Chardin having been one of the pioneers in that respect, that the entire human race had its beginning in certain portions of Africa. Why? Ask the gods. In any event, that's where the humanity developed, and then from there, in various divisions, it migrated over a long period of time to various portions of the world. Now, that being the case, let's say this centuries and millennia-long journeys of people, the wanderings. In German it is even called the Völkerwanderung, which means the wanderings of the peoples. So that ensued then for quite a long period after that. So after a while, by a while being many centuries in this case, many portions of the globe were populated by people. That doesn't mean that people were as densely spread over the face of the world, but that there were various little communities of people in all kinds of climates, in all kinds of parts of the world. And we might say that it is within these wanderings and ultimately the residences of the previously nomadic people that the idea and the issue of patriotism came about. And you may imagine it in such a way that here is this tribe of nomadic people led by a father figure, and the father figure finds a place which he thinks, no, this will be good for my people. And when he does, then he gathers his people there, and they begin to clear land for themselves, and whatever they were going to live in, whether it's in caves or whether it's in huts or so forth, they prepare habitations for themselves, and there they are. And from then on, they can, if they wish, refer to their new habitat as the land of our fatherland. So it's something of that sort, using a bit of Gnostic imagination, that I think occurred in most parts of the world and would make sense in this regard. So in order to give you an example, and I hope that you will not consider this presumptuous, the only reason that I'm using the history and the legendary of my native country is because that is a history that I know. Where I went to school, we were taught history. we were not taught gender studies and things like that. We were taught the history of Hungary several hours every day, whether we liked it or not, but I happen to like it. So therefore I know it both in the legendary sense and later on in the factual sense. So what apparently happened in this case, as an example again, just not anything else. I don't mean that this history is more meaningful. I don't mean that it is more helpful than the histories of other people, but it, I think, is a very good example of how a people will settle somewhere and how they will develop the kind of feelings for their habitat that may be called patriotism. So this takes us back to around before the year 900 AD, so into the Ural-Altai region, which is now Russia, where two peoples were living together, but as people always are, they weren't getting all that well together, so they decided to split into two. And these two people were the Finns and the Hungarians. Now the Finns decided that they didn't mind the cold weather, although I would certainly, and the Hungarians, however, said, no, we don't want to go up into the cold, icy lake country of Finland with the Finns, so we'll go somewhere else. We will go straight south over the Carpathian Mountains and see if we can find a place there. And so, and moreover, as this always happens, I mean, these were shamanistic pagans who were very attached to their visions, their ways of predicting the future and things of that sort. So the leading prince, whose name was Almos, which in Hungarian means the man of dreams. So the man of dreams and his wife, who also had some kind of a dreamy title, were dreaming, and the spirits came to them in the form of birds, particularly to the princess, and told her that we are coming now close to the place where your people are supposed to live, so tell your people to get all ready and to go over the mountain passes, because down there will be your country. And this all occurred in dreams. And the prince himself was called Almos, which means, actually means two things. It could just mean a sleepy head, but Alon being sleep and dream, but it also means a man of dreams. So he dreamt and his wife dreamt that this was to be done, and then in short order they gave the commands to their many people. They were nomads. They were traveling, the men were traveling on horseback, for which reason to this day the Hungarians are a very horse-loving nation, and we were for quite a long time, at least since the 18th century, very friendly with the British, for one main reason, because the British loved horses and the Hungarians loved horses. And my father was one of the leading horse lovers and writers about horses at that time. Just a little bit of bragging. In any event, so this was the understanding of the leadership, and then one after the other, there were 7 tribes of Hungarians, and each tribe had a chieftain, and the chieftain's name were und kommt Hubert, anyway, 7 of them. So they were all marshals to take their people, and they rode in on their horses, and then behind them, on ox carts mainly, came the civilian population, the women and the babies and whatever else they were carrying. So they came down, and these passes, mountain passes, are still there. There are monuments there and so forth. And this is on what would now be at the present time, because they changed the borders around there so much between the various countries that it's really amazing. But in any event, you might say they came from what now would be Ukraine and Poland, through the mountain passes down into present-day Hungary. Now, I mean, there are interesting elements that would arrest the attention of a student of mythology, such as particularly the communications from the spirit world to the Hungarians about this necessary move, especially the ones that came to the prince's wife, were in a strange mythological form. What came, she was asleep, she was dreaming, and what came to her in her dream was a big bird. And the bird spoke to her, "You will have to help to take your people into the new country, but you will only be there to help. Neither you nor your husband will reach the new country, but the son whom you carry now," she was pregnant, "he is the one who will lead the people through the passes into the new country." And she said, "Well, sure, that's fine." However, it occurred to me the curious symbolism that reminded me from Christian symbolism to the Holy Spirit coming to the Virgin Mary and saying, "You will bear the Savior." So this one, Arpad, the conqueror, who was born to Emeshet, became then the prince and the leader who led the people into the new country, which is somewhat like a Moses figure, somewhat like a Christ figure. In any event, a leader who leads you into the fatherland, the land that you can then call your fatherland and where you are going to continue. Very, very interesting, and some of these legends actually can be found in very old codices, one of them being the diary of Saint Stephan the king, who was a descendant of these people, who was a very good writer and who apparently had a great deal of interest in the legendary of his people. In any event, so there we are, and now they came down over the mountain passes of the Carpathians, and then they discovered with their scouts that there were some people around there. So you also got to remember this too, that wherever new people came, there were some old people around, or previous people. And again, you can't make a big deal out of this, because it's like, even let's say today, in today's city, you're driving around, you want to find an empty place, it will be very hard to find. So you're going to stop maybe in an inhabited area and seek for some shelter there. At any time in history, unless you go to the Sahara Desert or the middle of Siberia, it's difficult to find places that are not inhabited, at least to some extent, already. So in any event, they came, the spies, the Hungarian spies, said, well, you know, there's a small group of people, they speak a language like some of the people whom we contacted back there on the other side of the mountains, because they were a variety of northern Slavs. I like to call them Proto-Slovaks, early Slovaks. The Hungarians and the Slovaks never got along terribly well, right up to this time. But that's just a local situation. But this was perhaps the beginning. So, all right, Arpad the Conqueror said, all right, do they have a leader? Oh, yes, they have a leader named Svatopluk. So he prepared a tray, a box with various gifts, and said, get on your horse and take this to their leader. So what he had in his gift box was some earth with grass, some water, let's see what else. And definitely some grass, and then they prepared. The Hungarians were crazy already about their horses at that time, so they picked a beautiful snow-white stallion, and their messenger got on the stallion and was carrying these gifts and went over to the people who were there, the almost original inhabitants. So he presented the Slavic chieftain Svatopluk with these things, with the grass and the water, and I wonder what the heck else. Excuse me?
The earth?
The earth, and some earth, that's right. What would the grass grow in if there was no earth? And so he gave this to the Slavic chieftain along with the horse, and then he went home. He must have had another extra horse with him. So he got home, reported to the Hungarian chieftain, and then they waited a few days, and then the Arpad the Conqueror sent another messenger, and he said, he to whom belongs no, this I said it wrong. He sent them that beautiful horse, which of course the Hungarians loved. The others, in return, what he asked for was some earth, some water, and some grass. And of course, the Slavic chieftain thought, oh dear, well, this is certainly a good deal. We get a beautiful horse for it, a Hungarian horse, and that's all we have to give them. So he sent those things back. And then came the second messenger. The messenger said, King, he to whom belongs the earth, the grass, and the water, to him belongs the land. So get on that white horse now and go, because we are coming. And the Hungarians moved in and kicked everybody out, and with various vicissitudes for now about 2,000 years, they remained in that land. And these are no doubt legends, but they very easily might have happened. So in any way, they were now in the Carpathian Basin, which remained the historical Hungary. But let's say then as now, it wasn't very easy to come to a new land and to survive there in peace. Because for one thing, they had relatives. You know, those relatives, they can be a real problem. So just like when you, let's say, you move into a new house or into a new area, and then your impecunious relatives arrive and say, well, come on, we want a piece of that house too. And then they start fighting with you. So there were all kinds of little tribes in what is now Russia, who were related to the Hungarians. I don't think you need to hear their names, but there were the Kumans and the Peshenyeks and the Seklers and quite a few. So these people said, oh, the Hungarians, they found a really nice land over there. So we better go there and live there too. So they moved in, and the Hungarians didn't invite them, so they tried to kick them out. So there were the first battles already to try to fight off the people who were coming in and were trying to take it away from the Hungarians. But they succeeded, and they established themselves there, and for about 100 years, because this occurred around 900 AD, so for about 100 years they were there, just enjoying themselves primarily by making raids to the various countries around, stealing all kinds of things, making off with the women, and otherwise having fun according to the customs of nomadic people. So for about 100 years, they were engaged in this freewheeling brigand lifestyle. And they enjoyed it immensely. Now, when from the year 900, it came to the year 1000, and by then they had a prince from the original ruling family who said, "Well, we are not going to survive if we keep this lifestyle up, because the people in the rest of Europe, in what is now Austria and Germany and the southern countries, they are getting very tired of these depredations of the Hungarians, and there are many of them, and they are going to come and defeat us and beat us up. So we have to find some way of getting along with these people." And then he found out that one way to do that would be to invite Christian missionaries, because then they can prove that the Hungarians are now civilized, they are no longer pagans, and that being the case, they could be accepted in due course into the community of the Hungarian nations. So Prince Géza, who was by that time the prince, he invited Benedictine monks who were led, I think, by Saint Adalbert of Prague, who was the Bishop of Prague at that time. And they came in, and with some sort of gentler encouragement by the Hungarian prince, they started converting the Hungarians. Although when they went to the Prince Géza himself and said, "Well, would you like to be baptized?" And he said, "Why?" "Well, because then you will be a Christian, you will enjoy all the benefits of heaven and so forth." And he shook his head and he said, "No, the Hungarian prince is a mighty prince. He can afford to have two religions at the same time." It's Hungarian sense of logic. In any event, he never converted, but he had a son whose pagan name was Vaik, and who converted and who was baptized to the name Stephan. He became the first king of Hungary, Saint Stephan, the king of the first dynasty, who then saw to it that by hook or by crook, as many Hungarians as possible would convert, and who sent ambassadors to various places, to the Emperor of Byzantium, which was of course to the east of Hungary, and to the Pope in Rome, which was to the southwest. And so the Pope Sylvester II, who, as we probably should be proud of it, has had the reputation of the magician Pope. He was a Benedictine monk by the name of Gerbert from France. He studied magic and various occult arts with the Arab magicians in Spain, and he was greatly respected and probably feared, but probably just because of that, because everybody wanted to be nice to him, they made him first a bishop, then they made him a pope. So he was the magician Pope. It was said, I don't know, I wasn't there, if I was, I don't remember, that he had as another famous magician later on, and that was Saint Albert the Great, Albertus Magnus. He had a puppet, or a sort of a statue puppet, and this puppet would talk. And when he asked it question, it would give answers. And the Italian cardinals and things in Rome were dreadfully afraid of that, but Pope Sylvester told them, this will be to our benefit, I will use it for the benefit of the church, so you Italianos shut up. So when the emissaries of Saint Stephan the king arrived in Rome, the Pope Sylvester was very pleased, and he sent him a crown. And this became the Holy Crown of Hungary, which to this day is there. And if you should go to Budapest, if you're lucky, we were not lucky the last time we were there, you will go to the Houses of Parliament, where in the great hall, enclosed by the grounds, the guards of the Holy Crown is the crown exposed for everybody to see. The crown that is now 2,000 years old, according to the records. And he sent the letter to Saint Stephan saying that I am only the successor of the apostles, I the Pope, but you are an apostle, and I send you the crown. Meanwhile, I think a few years later, the Emperor Manuel Ducas of Byzantium, of the Eastern Empire, said, well, I better make friends with these Hungarians also. So he sent another crown, which is the form of a diadem, and with beautiful Byzantine jeweled pictures there. So Saint Stephan accepted that too, and they fused the two crowns, the crown from the west and the crown from the east. And that became sort of a symbol of the fact that the Hungarians are sort of the first Eurasians, which is a term that is being bandied about nowadays, namely at the border of Europe and of Asia. And so the two crowns, the crown from the east and the crown from the west, together made the Holy Crown of Saint Stephan, which has survived many vicissitudes up to the present time. So these were the foundations of the Hungarian fatherland. And you can see, perhaps, with some little imagination, that a bunch of people who have been wandering around for God knows how, really only God knows how long. There is a theory, for instance, which I think is a little excessive, but it's a theory of Hungarian scientists who said that the ancient Hungarians spent a lot of time in their nomadic life in ancient Egypt, and that some contemporary Hungarian words are derived from Egyptian, to which my teacher, Dr. Alvin Boyd-Kuhn, would have said, yeah, but so are innumerable words in English, in German, in French. The Egyptian influence is everywhere. So you can't be so sure that the Hungarians were in Egypt. But it would be, for instance, the word Pharaoh, that Pharaoh became in the Hungarian language Fő-úr, which means chief lord. Could be. In any event, present-day Hungarians, as you can see, don't really look like Egyptians. However, they have obviously wandered over vast territories in the Middle East, perhaps even in the Far East, and there's that famous Hungarian linguist and scholar Alexander Csoma de Körös in the 18th century had believed and acted upon. They were at one time, the ancient Hungarians were at one time in Asia and had been absorbed, or at least a portion, those who didn't wander away, had been absorbed into Tibet. And that the ancient Hungarians, therefore, were very closely related to Tibet. And here, Alexander Csoma de Körös was a Transylvanian scholar who, very impecunious, having no money, who practically walked on his two big Hungarian feet all the way from Hungary, to Transylvania, Hungary, to Tibet. He was the first man who wrote an English-Tibetan dictionary and a Tibetan grammar. And then he died on the outskirts of Tibet. In Darjeeling, the British British Indian government erected a statue to him as the great linguist who researched the Asian religion, and he's buried somewhere in the vicinity of Darjeeling. So, the Hungarians themselves had all kinds of ideas about this. We came from somewhere. We don't exactly know where. And the Hungarian language, if you really investigate it very thoroughly, it has words from every country, living and dead, in the world. So the likelihood is that the ancient Hungarians, in their nomadic wanderings about, had gotten to many different countries, learned some of the languages there, and picked up various other sources of information. But when they found their own place on the inside from our point of view, inside the Carpathian Mountains in the present-day Hungary, then they remained there, and they remained there with considerable difficulties, because all kinds of people, even after the first battles, various European nations who said, well, these are barbarian people, they come along, they steal everything, they make off with the women, all this sort of thing. Well, we should beat them up and chase them out of there. Well, that wasn't so easily done. The Hungarians were very good with their arrows, and even in early medieval Europe, there was found a phrase in Latin which was inserted in the East European countries into the church, the church's litany. I mean, the litany where the people ask from pestilence, please save us, O Lord, from whatever, from the incursions of dragons, save us, O Lord. And in there is one, from the arrows of the Hungarians, save us, O Lord. Assagitis Hungarorum libera nos Domine. So, they gained a certain amount of respect because they're very tough and very warlike qualities. So anyway, against great many difficulties they remain there, and I shouldn't really give you a complete course in Hungarian history here, but let us say it wasn't an easy task to stay there in that Carpathian basin. One invasion after the other. First came the Mongols, also known as Tartars, and possibly the inventors of tartar sauce at that. So the Mongols came, that was about 100 years later, who reduced Hungary from a major European power to a little country because they killed everybody. They would ride into the villages, and they herd the people together, they kill men, women, and children, they kill the horses, they kill the cattle, they cut off the heads primarily of people and make a sort of a pyramid out of it and get into their little horses and ride someplace else. Very unpleasant company. In any event, they were the first one. Prior to that, see, the strange people, including the Hungarians, would gravitate to that Carpathian basin because before that, the Huns, with the famous King Attila, had also settled for a period of time in present-day Hungary. But the Huns and the Hungarians are not the same. There is perhaps a relationship. In any event, Attila the Great conqueror himself died in present-day Hungary, and the legend has it that he was buried in present-day Hungary in one of the tributaries of not of the Danube, but of the Tisza River, the other big river, and people to this day are looking for Attila's tomb. They haven't found it. But the story that came down was that Attila's body was taken to this area where there are a lot of tributaries of the Tisza River, of the Danube River, and they withdrew the water from that part of the river, and they buried him in the river bed with about 100 servants who were shot with arrows so that they would keep him company in the other world. So let us say the orientation of the Hungarian, of the Huns toward people and of getting spirits to serve their king was very, very active. By the way, just to indicate that this is not a legend, he had a brother by the name of Buddha. And Buddha lived in which is now Budapest, because Buda is the town on one side of the Danube, Pest is on the other side. He was Attila's brother, but he did not succeed to him. But after Attila's death, the Huns said, okay, we better get out of here. And so they went back to Asia. Then later on came the Mongols. And then came the really big difficulty, and I'll quit the history for them because I have some other things to say. The real big difficulty was to the effect that now an enemy of immense persistence and immense power had taken hold in the East, conquered Constantinople and conquered practically all of the Middle East and was coming up the Balkans, and that was the Ottoman Empire of the Turks. So the Turks were coming. About every 100 years for the next few hundred, there was an invasion of the Turks coming up the Balkans into Hungary. And for about 200 years, the Hungarians kept them at bay. But the Turks became more and more intent of coming further up. And in 1500, by now we are up, 1529, at the terrible Battle of Mohacs, they annihilated the Hungarian army. The Hungarian king, 11 bishops, something like 200 or 300 Hungarian nobles and countless Hungarian soldiers died on that particular battlefield. And to this day, it has a somber atmosphere, at least I felt. So, you know, the Turks would do this sort of thing. They would trick their enemies into a particular area, and then they would have a big battle, and they're very good at annihilating their enemies. Earlier on, further down in the Balkans, in Serbia, they did the same to the Serbs in what is now Kosovo, and where there is a field that is called the Field of the Blackbirds. On the Field of the Blackbirds, similarly, the entire Serbian nobility and clergy and everybody who was around was mowed down by the Turks. So it's the sacred spot of the Serbs. And incidentally, the Field of the Blackbirds will remain a great source of annoyance of the Serbs against the Americans. Why? Because that is so sacred to them, having been really the downfall of their nation, that when the Kosovo War was going on the American pressure, the Field of the Blackbirds was not returned to Serbia, but was made into some kind of a rinky-dink independent country, somewhat like the Ukraine, and was never given back to the Serbs. And so there is great hatred against the Americans and various European countries for having arranged that. But the European and the other these allied countries never gave up. They visited Eastern Europe with more injustice and more balderdash than they could possibly take, which of course was also true of Hungary, particularly after World War II, and now I'll quit the history, but just let me tell you that the Hungarian kingdom, which stood with some little variations within those particular borders for several hundred years, the Hungarian kingdom was reduced to 1/4 of its previous territory after the Trianon peace treaty after World War I. Let me tell you that the appreciation of that treatment that Hungary received was not very great when I went to school and so forth. In any event, it's still that way. So there was some of those countries were very badly treated. Now, anyway, this is an example, a historical example of a fatherland. These little people who came from far away from behind the Ural Mountains and then crossed the Carpathians to come in there, these little people remained there after one invasion after the other and never would budge, and eventually, in association with Austria particularly, became a quite prosperous and very fine country, where after World War I already, but I had the privilege to be born. And I remained a Hungarian patriot ever since, not neglecting, however, my patriotic duties to the United States. Now, that's history, and I'm sorry to have inflicted it on you. But let's see, so in the year 1000 was the coronation of King Saint Stephan, and until 1922 or something like that, every king of Hungary was crowned with that holy crown. After which, again, the wisdom of the Western allies, French, American, British, who else was in the, had, let's say, chased away the Habsburg dynasty, who for several hundred years were the kings of Hungary by that time, and then things went from bad to worse. Now, let's see, there are other historical points that may be mentioned, but that should not be necessarily mentioned. Now, what this means is that giving room for certain individual cases, the story of most countries is somewhat similar. People come from somewhere, they establish their own country, then other people try to come in and kick them out, they have to fight them off. It goes on and on like this century after century. So that could very well be made to apply to many other countries as well. Now, nevertheless, after the 1600s, after the famous siege of Vienna, which was the last big invasion of the Turks, before that they had a big naval battle of Lepanto against the Turks. They had all kinds of things, but this was the last time where I think Sultan Mahmud came in with a gigantic Turkish army, and they wanted to take Vienna. Now, if they had conquered Vienna, they would have conquered Europe. Vienna was the seat of the Holy Roman Emperor and was the farthest outpost of Western culture, shall we say, in the East. And if that had broken down, the gates of Europe to the Turkish invasion would have been completely open. But as it happened, with a sort of a last big effort, all the remaining European countries got together and they congregated around Vienna. They tore up there wasn't any concrete yet, but probably the bricks of the road of Vienna, and made with it various obstacles, and with a long and very bloody siege, they fought the Turks off. Jan Sobieski, the king of Poland, with his Polish cavalry, rode out against the Turks, and they were from every European country. There were people there, and that was so. The Battle of Vienna, 16-something, was really the end of the effective Turkish invasion. Of course, there were still Turks down in Serbia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Albania, around there, and so forth, and remained in many of those places for a long time. But they were also beaten back from Hungary. Now then, let's take a little look at that from now, not necessarily historical, but a necessary point of view. Up to this time, up to the repelling of the Turks, there were no how should I put it? There were no efforts on the part of Europe to fight off other invaders. That was the great victory, and after that, really a pretty good period of history for a while set in. So by the 1700s, the Turks were withdrawn and clear into Eastern Europe, not quite into the Balkans. There was the beginning of free countries. Now, you ask yourself, was there patriotism? Certainly there was. And not only was it Hungarian patriotism, which stood up for several hundred years, but it was European patriotism. They knew that if they were conquered by the Turks, Christian Europe would have come to an end. So it was a little bit like what the successors, the Turks now are in a different bag of tricks, but let's say the Turks were the Al-Qaeda of that particular historical period, and they would have eaten up all of Europe, but at the end of it, all of Europe got together. The Germans were there, the French were there, the Italians were there, people from Poland and Lithuania and Russia and everywhere, and they did beat the Turks back, which was certainly a great and wonderful thing, and really the beginning of the flourishing of Eastern Europe, which was only really seriously impeded by World War I. Now then, however, we need to look, I think, at a little implications of these and associated events. So, what did we have until the conquest against the Turks, pretty much? So pretty much until the 18th century, 1700s, 18th century, what we had everywhere in Europe were not nations. What you had were dynastic countries. The Habsburgs ruled the Holy Roman Empire, including Hungary. They were elected by the Hungarian Diet, as we call it, and that's not a diet that you eat, but it's like when they say that in the history books that Martin Luther went on a diet of worms, because there is a German city named Worms. And so when he went, there was a diet of worms. There was all the nobles and the bishops got together there. So, it's a joke. It's supposed to be a joke, but it's not really funny. But let us say, so there were various incidents like that, but Europe was a dynastic continent. The countries were ruled by various dynasties, and depending on the abilities and of these dynasties, they were taken care of. Now, the reason I mention this is why? Because there were no nations. There were peoples, and there were kings, and emperors, and dukes and grand dukes and all kinds of things, but there was nothing else. So then things began to change, and probably the next really big change was the French Revolution. And in the French Revolution's mythology was that they were bringing the rule of the people, which of course, except for the fact that a lot of heads rolled down by the guillotine, it really didn't amount to so much. But in any event, so a mythos arose. We are organizing a revolution which will bring the people to power. Well, that really didn't happen, because out of the people rose a little pot-bellied cavalry officer with a strange white hat by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, and he created the French Empire. He became the emperor of the French, and really also caused a great deal of difficulty, because the one thing that he really was, he was an excellent general, a great planner of battle strategy. So there was a short period of this idea that the dynasties are over and the people, the rule of the people can be there. That was the myth of the French Revolution. It didn't really work out, obviously, with the subsequent events also. Then, so now that brings us up into the 19th century, of course, and when it comes to the 19th century, then something occurs that is germane to our purposes, and you probably gave up completely that I'm ever going to say anything about the subject matter, but here is the subject matter. First, the rule of the people, that didn't work out. Then came the Napoleonic Wars, and by 1848, there came about something that infected practically every nation in Europe, which came to be called the springtime of nations. And this was the birth of nationalism. In practically every country there were nationalistic revolutions. The big thing now, the big myth now was the nation. You had them everywhere, and no doubt to the great discomfort of many people. And we are still suffering in certain ways the results of those developments. Obviously, the rule of the people never worked. The springtime of nations didn't work either. But let us say there was the birth of nationalism, which is still with us. So now how should I put it? The myth of the divine rights of kings and of the emperors and all of these things was gradually swept away, but what came was the mythos of a nation. So it wasn't the people now so much, but it was the nation and nationalism. And we might say that after the birth of nationalism, we had the milder form of the nationalistic philosophies came to be the so-called patriotism. So if you were, as time went on and the centuries old and we came close to World War I, the people who were pushing the importance of their particular nation and the ways in which their nations could be advanced, how they could get more territory, all sorts of things like that, came into their own by way of the prevailing nationalism. Now, here again, let's be intelligent about it. No doubt nationalism at various times, especially when it came to World War I and then World War II, has created a lot of trouble. At the same time, it also had its own virtues. So, let's say, for instance, when I was still a child, in the wake of World War I, let's say, if it hadn't been for Hungarian nationalism, in the wake of our having lost World War I and so forth, it would have been the most depressed nation in the world. So let us say the nationalistic mythos that we are a special people, that we are a nation, and as such we ought to help each other out and have our own plans and our own policies, came now more and more to the front. But what one needs to keep in mind is that all of these myths can be and have been taken to excess and thereby corrupted. For instance, the monarchist myth, which I greatly revere because I am a dyed in the wool monarchist myself, and I wish nothing more than the return of the descendants of our last king to Hungary. I have relatives who write books about it, all that sort of thing. When I was a little tyke over my bed was a nice big picture of the Virgin Mary, which I think was an assumption of the Virgin Mary, very beautiful. In the middle there was a small crucifix, and on the other side was the picture of the Crown Prince of Hungary and Austria, His Imperial and Royal Highness Otto, who would have been our king if they had let him. In any event, I had monarchism in my blood, and I still do. So you wonder why I don't get very excited about American elections, because this is nothing like what we used to have. This is nothing like Kaiser Wilhelm, and it's nothing like the Austrian Emperor. It's just nothing like that, Let's put it that way. In any event, now there we are, as the movement went from trying to have let's say the myth of the people, that didn't work out, and finally the rule of the nation, which of course also caused a great deal of difficulty. And so patriotism came as a manifestation of the birth of nationalism. Now, there were terrible consequences. By the year 1900, nationalists pretending to be patriots began to take over in many, many countries. And this, of course, was the natural result, I would feel, for the great and unnecessary changes which so many of the countries have been put through. The chasing away of the Emperor of Germany, the chasing away of the Emperor of Austria, all kinds of things of that sort, more and more instability, the old symbols all went by the wayside, and what arose out of it was Well, what rose out of it was the coming of the various fascistic, nationalistic governments, including Adolf Hitler and other terrible things, which then led to World War II. Now, so these are all kind of objective statements, and I think you're probably bored to tears. If I would have to listen to myself tonight, I think I would be. But now, in final conclusion, as I often say, we need to look at something maybe a little more philosophical and ultimately more important. Let's say, why should there be patriotism? Why should people be in a state of feeling loyalty to the country where they grew up, or to which they came, or to which their ancestors came, as so often has been the case in the United States? These issues are of great importance, and when these allegiances to one's own country, to one's own nation, because the nation concept is still here, are of great importance for the future. And that being the case, I don't think that a patriotic adhering to these traditions is any great difficulty. Now, of course, there are always slogans and propaganda that masks what is really happening. So let us say, no doubt a good many German Nazis considered themselves patriots, and up to a point they were, but they also mixed their patriotism with so much stupidity that it became a very uncomfortable, terrible war. But let us say, so that there's anything that you run across in this world and in world history. History was my first love before religion, so you know I really like it. But let us say one needs to realize that every mythos that people live by, and I probably forgot the most pernicious of all the myths, and that was the myth of the communists. The proletariat will rule the world. It wasn't just the people now, it wasn't the nation, it was the proletariat. But of course, interestingly enough, in most countries, except for very brief periods, what they called the proletariat, sort of the industrial workers and things like that, the proletariat didn't want to rule the world. The proletariat wanted to eat, wanted to have jobs, wanted to have houses to live in, and how prosaic can you get when you could be there with the great world revolution, with all the red banners and all the red borders, So it just didn't work either. Which one of the great proofs of that was in World War II, and some of that I unfortunately observed because I couldn't get away, namely that Stalin was told by the time that when the Germans came and had occupied a lot of Russia, that he will never be able to defeat the Germans unless he appeals to Mother Russia and appeals to patriotism. And with the appeal to the patriotism to defeat the enemies of Mother Russia, he finally, of course with help from Western allies, managed to beat the Germans. He said, "Comrade Stalin, our boys are not going to fight for communism. They are going to fight for Mother Russia, but they are not going to fight for world revolution. It doesn't mean anything to them. What the hell is it, you know?" And so it worked. Now then, we need to keep in mind, in terms of the desirable or undesirable role of patriotism in the future and within the context of our own situation here, we need to keep in. I came across a saying that is every once in a while quoted from Albert Einstein, of all people. And Albert Einstein said, "God does not play dice." I think you get it. In other words, the things that happen in this world, and this is of course a leading scientist of that day saying that when the things that happen in this world have a probably at that time hidden, but they have an agenda. It may not look like they're happening for a reason, but there are reasons other than the ones that we know of. And so, since God does not play dice, from that I think we can deduce, and that's my final conclusion, unless you really were anxious to get out the door already. This is my final conclusion, that the place where we were born, or the place to which our ancestors came, the ambience that we have imbibed, maybe even in a country that was not our own to begin with, these circumstances are not fortuitous. They didn't just happen because Joe Kovac, or the Hungarian guy, got on the boat and came from Europe to America in order to have a better life. That's a materialist point of view. You know, people don't do things just in order to have a better life. People do things because they want to feel better. That's the issue. There were times when I felt very good and had a very empty stomach. The two are not necessarily connected, but of course there is a limit. After a while you have to put something in your stomach. But so the issue is really that there are hidden designs why we are moved on the great checkerboard, on the great chessboard of the world. And it's incumbent upon us to get at least the feeling of this. Why is this happening? How can I participate in it more consciously, more insightfully, more wisely? And that is where patriotism comes in. In other words, when I come to see that who I am, where I was born, what I am doing, where I live, is not because the gods play dice, but there is an intention behind it. You ask me, well, what was the intention? I can't tell you, but there was an intention. Things happen for a purpose. It's not our purpose, but it's a purpose. And therefore, if we develop a feeling for the hidden purposes, we develop a feeling for the secrets of this world, then we may be patriotic, we may be attached in a wise and good manner to our fatherland, or whatever we wish to call it, and we may serve the purpose of the country or the continent or the place to which fate has put us. I'm not about to become personal, But let's put it that way, it didn't take me too long. It took me a few months to recognize why I had come to the United States. And I still have that conviction, and I still act on that mythos. That is the mythos that Joseph Campbell was talking about. If you have a myth in your mind, if you have a story in your mind as to what is going on, how you are supposed to fit into it, what you can do, then you are doing what you are supposed to do, and not because God is playing dice. Now, of course, there are all kinds of peculiar things which to me are so weird that I don't even want to talk about them. Well, why not be a citizen of the world? Well, what does that mean? That means that my national brothers will be, let's see, the people in Tasmania. I have never been there. I don't know anything about them. It's a pure bunch of borders. You have to be the loyal citizen and the good tax-paying member of an existing and viable entity in this world. And if you do, then you can contribute both to your own welfare and to the welfare of the humanity where you find itself. And if you can do that, then you are well off. But if you go off in these totally unrealistic fantasies of being a citizen in the world and all this sort of thing, all you will do is advance nefarious ends. I am not going to go into them because the word will spread all the way down Beechwood and all the way down to the city that Stephan is a conspiracy theorist. Well, that's it. You know, it's too much work to hatch conspiracies. I am too tired to do that sort of thing, and I was too tired when I was 18 years old. I didn't like that sort of balderdash then. But we have to remember that if we have ideals, and if these ideals include a positive relationship with the place where we are living, with the people who are living there, with the culture of which we are a part, then we have not been in this world in vain. If we don't do that, then it may have been in vain. And therefore, none of us like to be in vain people. None of us like to have lived for no good reason. But if we keep in our minds the insight, the wisdom to which we must come individually, it is not done in groups. But on the other hand, individuals live in countries. Individuals live in communities, in cities, and so forth. And when their relationship at the feeling tone level to their environment is positive, then they can contribute to it. And I assure you that if you are honorable and ethical and good, then what you will experience is that your environment, your country, your continent where you live will treat you well. I can testify to it because I have been treated very well, because I have an abiding gratitude to the United States for having taken me in and for having been hospitable to the ideas that I brought with me and that I was trying to promote. So try to become conscious of why we are here. Try to become conscious as to what contribution we can make to this culture to these people, to this ambience, and don't go off in fantastical and unrealizable situations of being a citizen of the world and this, that, and the other thing. We all are here for certain purposes which we must discover. Nobody is going to be there and hand you a manual. This is why you came. Yeah. All right, Stephan Hoeller, you came to America so that you could be on 2560 North Beechwood Drive speaking to a bunch of nice people and trying to make them laugh. At least at times. Yeah. No. But you have an intuition, you have an insight, you have a responsiveness to the greater will. And when you're responsive to that greater will, then anything good can happen. Because when that greater will becomes incarnate in you, there is no stopping what you can do, how much good you can do, and how you can pay, stupid expression by the way, to pay back your environment, your host country, your community where you are, some of what you have received. Because to be grateful for where we are, to be grateful for what we receive, to be grateful for what we still shall receive. That is really the most wonderful thing in life. If you are grateful for being here, if you are grateful for the good things that are still coming, if you are grateful for the magnificent divine order within which you find yourself, then you are a happy, a good individual who has fulfilled up to this point the purpose of life. And I think that is real patriotism, to be thankful for where we are, to be thankful for the people we are with, be thankful for all the helpful things that have happened to us somewhere, and with the aid of that gratitude to improve the situation. People always talk, to make the world a better place. You know how you make the world a better place? By becoming better yourself. And if you can't do that or don't want to do that, then maybe God is playing dice. But I don't think he is. So let's say, to me, the patriotism is a virtue. Like everything else, it shouldn't be driven to extremes. It shouldn't be mixed with elements that don't belong there. But patriotism is part, I think, of the honorable, the honest, and the good intentions of a good person. And if we cultivate that, then I think we certainly don't have to be ashamed of having that old glory here. And I just conclude with a little personal observation that what I will never forget. It's the spring of 1945. Atom bombs are being dropped and things of that sort. I was back in Hungary. And there was one guy in this rural town, a fairly big town, who had been, I don't think he was American, but he had been in America. He rode a bicycle and later on a motorcycle when he got hold of one that always had a good-sized American flag on it. And that was Russian occupation and all these sorts of things. When he drove down the street of the city of Szeged, the people would stop and clap and cheer him, and he said, "America, America, America." That's what that flag meant and means to a lot of people in the world. That is the symbol of the mythos, and is the symbol of patriotism. And I think that this country is indeed a fatherland, a motherland, a land of promise still. There are many reasons for it, and as such, I don't think we have anything to fear, but we have much to hope for, and I thank you very much.